My stepsister took my husband with my ruthless family's support. Now he regrets everything. But I've got one last surprise for him. Hey, I'm Jenny. I was married to Brad, my high school sweetheart, for 8 years. We had 2 great kids together, Emma, who's 6, and Noah, who's 4. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good, you know? We had our little house, both of us worked hard, and the kids were our world. I thought we were solid, a real team. Then everything started to get weird when my dad, Bill, remarried this woman named Kathy after my mom passed away. Kathy had a daughter, Claire, from a previous marriage. Claire wasn't a kid either, she was 26 when all this went down. I didn't think much of her at first. She seemed fine, if a little full of herself, but I was trying to be nice, you know, be the good daughter and make my dad happy since he was going through a lot after my mom died. I figured Claire was just part of the new family, and we'd have to get along. At first, she was just there. She'd come around for dinners, act all nice, and smile at everyone. Nothing strange, right? But then she started making these comments about Brad, and they were just off. Like, once she told me, "Wow, Jenny, you're so lucky. Brad's not just handsome, but he's successful too. He's a real catch." I thought she was just being complimentary, but looking back, it was so weird. At the time, I just laughed it off, saying something like, "Yeah, I guess I hit the jackpot." Honestly, I thought she was just awkward, maybe a little jealous, but harmless. Big mistake. Things really started to feel wrong one evening. I was doing laundry or something, you know, the usual house stuff, and I walked by the living room. I heard Claire's voice, but it had this weird tone, all sweet and sugary, which was out of character for her. She was talking to Brad, and it wasn't just small talk. I couldn't make out everything, so I moved closer, and that's when I heard it. "You know, Jenny doesn't deserve you, Brad. She's not right for you. You need someone who really gets you, someone who can match your ambition." I froze. What the hell was this? I peeked around the corner, and there she was, sitting way too close to him on the couch. And Brad? He didn't look disgusted or uncomfortable. He looked intrigued, like he was actually considering what she was saying. He mumbled something about being married, but it was weak. There was no real fight in his voice. My heart was pounding, and I wanted to just run in there and scream at them both, but I didn't. I just stood there, feeling like my world was crumbling right in front of me. After I managed to pull myself together, I stormed upstairs, my mind racing. Was I crazy? Was Claire actually trying to steal my husband? No way, right? But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The next day, I told my dad and Kathy about it. I thought they'd back me up, tell me I wasn't being paranoid. But when I explained what I heard, my dad just kind of shrugged it off. "Jenny, you're always so dramatic. Claire wouldn't do something like that," he said, like it was nothing. Then Kathy chimed in, "Maybe Brad just needs someone who's more on his level, you know, someone who understands him better." I felt like I was being gaslit by my own family. My own father and his new wife were basically telling me it'd be better if Brad left me for Claire. It was like a slap in the face. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. From that point on, everything started falling apart fast. Brad and I started fighting all the time. We'd argue about stupid things, like why he was always working late or why he wasn't spending time with the kids, but really, it was all about Claire. I could feel him pulling away, but every time I tried to bring up Claire, he'd get defensive or just brush me off. A few weeks later, Brad came home late, as usual, and sat me down. He had this serious look on his face, and I just knew what was coming. My stomach was in knots. "Jenny, we need to talk," he said, avoiding eye contact. "I think it's best if we go our separate ways." "Is this about Claire?" I asked, even though I already knew the answer. He didn't say anything, just looked down at the floor like a coward. "I just need something different," he mumbled. Different. That word echoed in my head. What the hell does that even mean, different? Was I just not enough for him anymore? Were 8 years of marriage, 2 kids, and everything we'd built together not enough? He packed his bags that night and left without so much as a fight. Just like that, my marriage was over. He walked out the door, leaving me alone with Emma and Noah, who couldn't understand why Daddy wasn't coming home. The divorce papers came quickly, like he couldn't wait to be rid of me. And you know what the worst part was? He and Claire didn't waste any time. They got married a few months later. My own stepsister married my husband, and I had to explain to my kids why their dad was starting a new life with someone else. My dad and Kathy even went to the wedding, all smiles, like everything was just fine. I didn't go, obviously. Instead, I stayed home with my kids, trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces. It was like living in some messed up nightmare that I couldn't wake up from. I remember sitting on the floor of my bedroom that night, feeling so angry, so betrayed. How could Brad do this to me? How could Claire, my own stepsister, be so cruel? And how could my dad and Kathy just stand by and let it happen? That's when I made a decision. I wasn't going to let them break me. I had Emma and Noah to think about. They needed me, and I needed to be strong for them. I didn't know how I was going to do it, but I was determined to start over. I wasn't going to let Brad and Claire win. They could have each other. I had more important things to focus on, like my kids and figuring out how to rebuild my life. And that's where my journey really began. So, after Brad left, I was completely lost. I mean, how do you even start to put your life back together when your husband just walks out like that? I was stuck in this fog for a while, trying to figure out what to do next. The house felt so empty, and every corner reminded me of the life I thought I had, the life that was gone now. But I didn't have the luxury of sitting around feeling sorry for myself. I had 2 kids who needed me, Emma and Noah. And they didn't understand what was happening. To them, Daddy just wasn't coming home, and they wanted to know why. Emma, who was 6 at the time, would ask me every day, "Mommy, where's Daddy? Is he coming back today?" And Noah, only 4, didn't really get it, but he could tell something was off. He'd say stuff like, "Mommy, is Daddy mad at us?" I had no idea how to answer them. I mean, how do you explain to your kids that their father chose to leave, that he picked someone else over them? So I did what I could. I'd hug them, kiss them good night, and tell them that we were going to be okay, even though deep down, I wasn't sure if we were. I remember one night, Emma came up to me with this serious look on her face, like she'd been thinking hard about something. "Mommy, are we poor now?" she asked. That one hit me like a truck. I mean, we weren't poor yet, but we were heading in that direction if I didn't get my act together. Brad was making good money, but the child support he was giving me? It was a joke. It wasn't even enough to cover the basics, let alone all the extra stuff like school supplies, clothes, or, life. So there I was, sitting at the kitchen table one night, staring at our bank account, and it was not a pretty sight. I had no job, hadn't worked in almost 10 years, and I was trying to figure out how to make ends meet. Every time I thought about it, I got this sick feeling in my stomach. How was I going to support my kids? I couldn't just magically find a job that paid enough to cover everything and also let me be around for Emma and Noah. It felt impossible. One of my friends suggested I go back to school, maybe pick up some new skills. You could start over. Yeah, easier said than done, right? But I didn't have a lot of options. I needed a job that paid more than minimum wage, and the only way to get one was to get some kind of education or training. So I did the scariest thing I could think of. I enrolled in community college. I signed up for some accounting classes because, let's be real, numbers make sense. They don't lie or cheat or leave you for your stepsister. Numbers just add up, and I needed something solid in my life. The first day of class, I felt like I was in way over my head. Everyone there seemed younger, smarter, more put together. But I kept going because what choice did I have? I had 2 kids counting on me. It was hard, like really hard, juggling school, taking care of Emma and Noah, and just trying to keep my head above water. It felt like I was drowning most days. But then I met Sarah. She was a single mom who had 2 kids of her own and was working 3 jobs while going to school. She was like a walking pep talk. "You got this, Jenny," she'd say. "We're tougher than we think." And you know what? She was right. Slowly but surely, I started getting the hang of things. Of course, Brad kept popping back into our lives like a bad habit that just won't go away. He'd call every couple of weeks, asking, "How are you doing? How are the kids?" Like he actually cared. But I knew better. He was just checking in because he felt guilty, not because he really wanted to be involved. The kids hadn't seen him in weeks, and every time I'd mention it, he'd come up with some excuse, "I've been busy with work," or "I'll see them soon." It was always something. One day, I just lost it. He called, all casual, asking how we were. I cut him off and said, "What do you want, Brad? Because if it's not to see your kids, then I don't care." There was this long pause, and then he said something about how hard things were for him too. I laughed, actually laughed, because what did he even know about hard? He wasn't the one trying to keep it together for 2 kids while going to school and trying not to fall apart every day. I hung up on him before he could say another word. I was done letting him drag me down. Months went by, and everything just became this blur of exhaustion. I was up late studying, working part-time jobs wherever I could find them, and still trying to be there for Emma and Noah. I went to their school events, helped them with homework, did everything I could to make sure their lives stayed as normal as possible. But it was hard. There were nights I cried myself to sleep, not sure how I was going to make it through the next day. Then, finally, the day came when I graduated. It wasn't some huge celebration or anything. There was no cap and gown, no fancy ceremony. It was just me, Sarah, and a few other classmates sitting around, eating pizza and drinking soda in the back of the classroom. But it felt like the biggest win of my life. We were all laughing and celebrating, and for the first time in a long time, I felt like I had accomplished something. On the drive home, I glanced in the rearview mirror at Emma and Noah, both of them asleep in the back seat, and I felt this overwhelming sense of pride. I had done it, against all the odds. I had made it through. When we got home, I told them, "Mommy graduated today." And of course, Noah's first response was, "Does that mean we can get ice cream?" I laughed so hard I actually cried, but this time, they were happy tears. The next morning, I woke up and realized that this was just the beginning. I had my diploma, but now I had to actually find a job. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but after everything I'd been through, I was ready. I wasn't that same woman who let life just happen to her anymore. I was going to make things happen for me and for my kids. That's when I realized I wasn't just Brad's ex-wife or the girl who got left for her stepsister. I was Jenny. I was a mom, a student, a woman who had fought tooth and nail to get her life back, and I was just getting started. So, fast forward a couple of years after everything fell apart, and honestly, I started to feel like things were finally turning around. I mean, it took a long time to get to this point, but bit by bit, I was starting to rebuild my life. After graduating from community college with my accounting degree, I managed to land a job at a small accounting firm. It wasn't some fancy place, but it was solid work, and the pay was decent. Most importantly, it was a job that actually let me pay the bills and give Emma and Noah the stability they deserved. I still remember that first day at the new job. I was so nervous walking in, wondering if I'd be able to keep up. I mean, I hadn't worked in an office setting in forever, and I was terrified that I'd screw up something basic, like sending an email or balancing a ledger. But my boss, Mr. Rogers, he was this super chill guy. He took the time to show me the ropes, and after a few weeks, I started feeling like, okay, maybe I can actually do this. Life at home was slowly getting better too. Emma and Noah were adjusting to the new normal, and I was doing my best to keep their routine as steady as possible. They were both growing up way too fast, though. It's crazy how, when you're stuck in survival mode, time just flies by without you even realizing it. One day at work, something completely unexpected happened. I was sitting at my desk, just doing my thing, when Mr. Rogers called me into his office. I instantly felt my stomach drop. My mind immediately went to all the worst-case scenarios. Did I mess up a big account? Was I getting fired? I tried to stay calm as I walked into his office, but I could feel my heart racing. "Jenny, I've been going over your work from the past few months," he started, and I was bracing for the worst. "And I got to say, I'm impressed. You've been really thorough, and I think you're ready for something bigger." "Wait, what?" I stood there, kind of stunned for a second, not really sure if I heard him right. "Bigger?" I asked, trying not to sound too eager, but inside, I was freaking out. He smiled and explained that they wanted me to start taking on more responsibility, handling some bigger clients, which meant more pay, more trust, and, yeah, more work. But still, it felt like a huge step forward. I walked out of that office feeling like I was floating. After everything I'd been through, getting left, having to start from scratch, it finally felt like I was getting somewhere. This was the break I had been working my butt off for. That night, when I got home, I told Emma and Noah, and their reaction, as usual, was all about what was in it for them. "Does this mean we get more ice cream?" Noah asked, grinning from ear to ear. I laughed because, of course, that's where their heads were at. But honestly, in that moment, I didn't even mind. We did celebrate with ice cream that night because, why not? It was one of those moments where I could see that all my hard work was starting to pay off, not just for me, but for my kids too. The next few weeks flew by. I was getting more comfortable at work, juggling bigger projects, and finding this new confidence in myself that I didn't even know I had. I wasn't just Jenny, the woman who got left by her husband, anymore. I was becoming something more, something stronger. I could feel it in the way I carried myself, how I interacted with people, even how I looked at life. Emma and Noah were thriving too. They were getting more independent, making friends at school, and just growing into their own little people. It's funny how kids adapt. I thought the whole thing with Brad leaving would mess them up more, but they were handling it better than I expected. They asked about him less and less, and while he did pop in and out of their lives, it wasn't as often as it should have been. But that's the thing with Brad, he was always good at disappearing when things got tough. One night, I was putting Emma and Noah to bed, and Emma, who was always the thinker, looked up at me with these big, serious eyes. "Mom, are we going to be okay?" she asked. I was caught off guard because it felt so random, but I could tell she had been thinking about it for a while. I sat down on her bed and hugged her. "Of course, sweetie. We're more than okay. We're a team, and we've got this." She smiled at that, and I could tell she felt better, but honestly, it was something I needed to remind myself of too. We were a team, me, Emma, and Noah. We were in this together, and as long as we had each other, we were going to be fine. One thing I didn't expect, though, was how much I'd actually start to enjoy my job. I mean, yeah, accounting isn't exactly thrilling, but it's funny how finding stability can feel like a thrill when you've been through chaos. Every day I went into work, I felt like I was doing something that mattered, not just for the company, but for me and my kids. Then, one afternoon, Mr. Rogers called me into his office again. This time, I wasn't nervous. I figured it was just a quick check-in or something. But instead, he offered me a bigger raise and an even more significant role at the firm. It was like everything was finally lining up. I thanked him, of course, trying not to show how excited I was, but inside, I was doing a little happy dance. I got home that night, and I couldn't wait to tell Emma and Noah the good news. They were sitting at the kitchen table, working on homework. I sat down with them and said, "Guess what, guys? Mom's got some exciting news." They both looked up, waiting for me to tell them. "Did you get a new job?" Emma asked. "No, but I did get a promotion, which means things are about to get even better for us." They both looked confused, and then Noah, always thinking about the important stuff, said, "So, do we get more ice cream?" I couldn't help but laugh. These kids, I swear. Life was settling into this rhythm that I hadn't felt in years. Work, kids, homework, the occasional night out with Sarah and a few other friends. Things weren't perfect, but they were stable, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next disaster to hit. That's when I knew I was really moving on. Brad, Claire, all that drama, they were just chapters in my past. I had bigger things ahead, and I was ready for whatever came next. So, things were finally starting to feel normal again. Work was going well, the kids were happy, and I had this sense that we were moving forward. I wasn't thinking about Brad or Claire much anymore. Honestly, they were like this annoying shadow that had faded over time. But, of course, life has a way of throwing unexpected crap your way, and just when I thought things were finally good, Brad came crawling back. It was a regular weeknight. I had just put Emma and Noah to bed after reading them their favorite stories. Emma loved anything about animals, and Noah was into superheroes. I was finally sitting down, trying to enjoy a moment of quiet, when my phone buzzed. I glanced at the screen, and there it was, Brad's name. My first instinct was to ignore it. We hadn't spoken in weeks, maybe even months, other than a few brief texts about the kids. So I figured this was just another check-in call where he pretended to care about what was going on, only to disappear again for weeks afterward. But something made me pick up the phone, and as soon as I heard his voice, I knew something was off. "Hey, Jenny, I've been thinking a lot about things," he started, sounding all serious and hesitant. I just sighed. "Here we go again. What do you want, Brad?" I asked, not in the mood for his usual nonsense. I had zero patience left for him, and he knew it. "I think I made a huge mistake," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I almost laughed out loud. This was the guy who walked out on me and our kids to marry my stepsister, and now he's having second thoughts? "You think?" I said, trying to keep the sarcasm out of my voice but failing. "I don't expect you to forgive me or anything, but things with Claire, they're not working out. I'm really struggling here," he continued, and I could hear the desperation in his voice. It was pathetic, honestly. I let him ramble on for a few more minutes about how miserable his life had become, how he thought Claire was different, and how he missed the stability of our family. It was like listening to someone talk about a bad investment, not a marriage. He kept trying to drop hints that maybe we could talk or work things out, but I knew where this was going, and I was done with it. "Brad, that's not my problem anymore," I finally said, cutting him off. "You made your choice. You picked Claire, and you left us behind. Now you're unhappy, and you want what? For me to feel sorry for you?" There was a long silence on the other end of the line, and for a second, I thought he'd hung up. But then he spoke again, quieter this time, like he was trying to be all vulnerable. "Can we at least meet and talk? I just need someone to talk to." I took a deep breath, thinking about Emma and Noah asleep upstairs. I thought about how hard it had been for them, adjusting to Brad's absence and all the changes that came with it. They deserved better than a dad who drifted in and out of their lives when it suited him. And I deserved better than to be dragged back into Brad's mess just because he couldn't figure out his own life. No, Brad, I said firmly. There's nothing left to say. You're not my responsibility anymore. I hung up before he could say anything else, and for the first time in a long time, I felt this sense of closure, like I'd finally slammed the door shut on that part of my life. Brad was no longer this anchor dragging me down. He was just gone. The next morning, life went on as usual. I made breakfast for Emma and Noah, got them ready for school, and headed to work. But in the back of my mind, I kept thinking about that phone call. It wasn't that I felt bad for Brad, far from it, but it was a reminder of how far I'd come. A few years ago, that call would have wrecked me. I would have spent days, maybe even weeks, agonizing over what he said, wondering if I should have given him another chance. But now? It was like a blip on my radar. I had moved on, and nothing Brad said could change that. A few days later, I was picking up the kids from school when Emma, who was always so observant, asked me something that caught me off guard. "Mom, why don't we see Dad as much anymore?" she asked, looking at me with those big, serious eyes of hers. Noah, sitting in the back seat, stayed quiet, but I could tell he was listening. I wasn't sure how to answer at first. I mean, how do you explain to your kids that their dad is unreliable without totally trashing him? I didn't want to lie, but I didn't want to hurt them either. "Sometimes people make choices that aren't fair," I said carefully. "Your dad loves you both, but he's trying to figure things out right now." Emma didn't say anything for a while, and I was worried she was upset, but then she just nodded. "Okay," she said quietly, and that was the end of the conversation. She didn't push for more, and I didn't offer any more explanations. I think part of her understood, even at 6 years old, that her dad wasn't the person she wanted him to be. That night, after the kids were in bed, I sat on the couch and thought about everything that had happened. The divorce, Brad marrying Claire, him calling to say he'd made a mistake. It was all so surreal. If you had told me a few years ago that I'd be here, on the other side of all that mess, I don't think I would have believed you. But here I was, and I was stronger than I ever thought I could be. I wasn't just surviving anymore, I was actually living. My job was going well, the kids were happy, and I had finally let go of the anger and bitterness that had weighed me down for so long. Brad's mess was his problem, not mine, and I wasn't going to let him or anyone else drag me back into it. As I sat there, I felt this sense of peace wash over me. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for the next disaster to hit. I wasn't looking over my shoulder, worried that my life was going to fall apart again. I had built something solid, something that no one could take away from me. And that's when I realized I didn't need Brad. I never did. So, after everything with Brad and his miserable attempt to come crawling back, life finally felt like it had some stability. I wasn't thinking about him anymore, and honestly, I felt like I'd found my rhythm again. Work was good, the kids were doing well in school, and for the first time in a long time, I was actually excited about the future. I wasn't just getting by, I was making real progress. Then, out of nowhere, I got a call from my lawyer. Now, I wasn't expecting anything, so when I saw his number pop up on my phone, I was confused. But I picked up, and that's when he hit me with the news. "Jenny, I wanted to give you a heads up. Brad's been having some financial troubles. His firm went under, and he's asking for a reduction in child support." Of course he was. I shouldn't have been surprised, but somehow, I was. After everything that had happened, after he basically abandoned our kids, now he wanted to give them even less. It was like he had some endless supply of selfishness to tap into. I felt this wave of anger rise up in me, but I tried to stay calm on the phone. "Okay, what are my options?" I asked. My lawyer, who'd been with me through the divorce, knew I wasn't about to just roll over for Brad. "We can fight it in court," he said, "but given his current situation, the judge might side with him. The best option might be to negotiate something that works for both sides." I sat there, staring at the wall, trying to figure out what to do. On one hand, I didn't want to let Brad off the hook. He had responsibilities, and just because his life was falling apart didn't mean he could shirk those. But on the other hand, I didn't want to drag this out in court for months, with the kids getting caught in the middle. "Let's meet and talk about it," I finally said. "I want to know exactly what we're dealing with." A few days later, I sat across from my lawyer, going over the numbers. Brad's situation was worse than I'd thought. His company had gone under, and apparently, things with Claire were as bad as they could get. My lawyer was careful with his words, but it was clear that Brad was struggling, not just financially, but in every way. He was drowning, and he wanted me to throw him a life raft. As much as I wanted to be petty and tell him to deal with his own mess, I had to think about Emma and Noah. They were the ones who would be affected by this, not me. After a long discussion, we came up with a plan. I wasn't going to reduce child support entirely, but we'd set up a fund for the kids' future, something that would ensure they were taken care of no matter what happened with Brad. That way, I could make sure they had what they needed, and Brad wouldn't be able to wiggle out of his responsibilities later. It wasn't exactly the victory I wanted, but it was the right thing for the kids. Later that week, I had to explain the situation to Emma and Noah in the simplest way possible. They were both sitting at the kitchen table, working on their homework, and I sat down with them, trying to figure out how to break it to them. "So, your dad's been having some money troubles," I started, and Emma immediately looked up with that serious expression she always had when she was trying to understand grown-up problems. "But it's nothing you need to worry about. We've set up a plan to make sure you guys are always taken care of." Noah, who was more interested in the drawing he was doing, didn't even seem to be listening, but Emma, she was thinking. "Does that mean we're not going to see Dad as much?" she asked quietly. I hadn't even thought about that. Brad had been in and out of their lives so randomly, and now, with his financial issues, who knew how often he'd even bother to show up? But I didn't want them to feel like they were losing anything. "You'll see your dad when he's able to visit, but I'll always be here, okay? We're going to be just fine." She nodded, like she understood, and then went back to her homework. I watched them both, feeling this mix of pride and sadness. They deserved better than the mess Brad had made of everything, but at least they had me. I was doing everything I could to make sure their lives were steady and secure, and that was what mattered. A few weeks later, on a random Saturday morning, I was in the kitchen making pancakes. It had become our little tradition, pancakes every Saturday morning, no matter what. The smell of them always filled the house, and the kids would run into the kitchen like clockwork, ready to eat. That morning was no different. Emma and Noah came bounding in, their faces lit up with excitement. "Mom, guess what?" Emma shouted as she ran in. "We won our soccer match, and I scored the winning goal." Noah, not wanting to be left out, added, "And I kicked the ball really hard. Almost hit the other team." He was grinning from ear to ear, clearly proud of himself. I smiled as I flipped another pancake. "That's amazing, guys. I'm so proud of both of you. Let's celebrate with some extra syrup today." As we sat down to eat, the sun streamed through the kitchen window, casting this warm glow over the table. I looked at Emma and Noah, listening to them chatter about their soccer game, and I realized something. This moment right here, was what it was all about. It wasn't the big wins or the dramatic victories that mattered. It was these little, quiet moments, sitting with my kids, knowing that no matter what had happened, we were okay. We had made it through the worst of it, and we were still standing. "Mom," Emma said suddenly, pulling me out of my thoughts, "are pancakes strong?" She was looking at the pancake on her plate like it was going to give her some kind of answer. I laughed. "Well, maybe not strong like a superhero, but they're strong enough to hold a lot of syrup, right?" Noah giggled. "Pancakes are super strong." And just like that, the whole conversation turned into a debate about whether pancakes were stronger than waffles, which ended with Noah insisting that waffles had secret powers because of the little squares that could hold syrup. As they kept talking, I realized how far we had come. We had gone from a broken family, trying to figure out how to move forward, to something stronger. We were a team now, the three of us, and nothing, not Brad, not his mess, not any of the chaos from the past, was going to tear us down. I didn't need a dramatic ending to our story. This right here, this simple Saturday morning, was all the closure I needed.